Frontproof Media Fight Talk. I'm here with senior writer and editor Hector Franco.
What's up, everybody? I hope everybody out there is doing lovely. If I could, I'd shake everybody's hand out there that's listening. Let's go ahead and get started on this fight talk.
And I'm here also with senior writer and editor Daniel Zaldivar.
What's up, man? Let's get into some boxing topics here.
No doubt. So this weekend, Sean Porter took on Andre Berto in a WBC eliminator bout. The winner getting a shot at Keith Thurman, or being in line for a shot at Keith Thurman for the WBC belt. I just want to get you guys' thoughts on that fight. Did you like it? Do you think that the winner deserves a shot at Thurman immediately? Give us your thoughts. We'll start with Hector and then go to Daniel, and I'll give my thoughts as well.
Well, I think that this fight was an ugly fight. It was fought on the inside. There was a lot of mugging on the inside. I think what happened is that Berto, if people may or may not remember through his past fights, most specifically against Juan Urango, he tends to hold and he likes to grab a lot. And with Porter, he wasn't able to do that, and he didn't like being on the inside, although there were some instances where he landed some great uppercuts on Porter. But I think what happened is that it got a little bit too hot in the kitchen for Berto, and Porter did what he was supposed to do. He took out a guy who is relatively inactive, and he was always, even while a world champion, was always kind of a suspect as well for many people. I don't think when Manny Pacquiao and Floyd were in their prime that anybody thought Berto could beat either one of those two guys. But it was a WBC title eliminator. I did think that the Thurman Porter fight was really close and it could have gone either way. So I wouldn't mind a rematch. Keith, after the fight, came into the ring and expressed that he was willing to give Porter the rematch and that all we needed to do was speak to Al Heyman to make it happen. But, a little disappointed that Thurman might only fight one more time this year. But I do believe that the Thurman Porter rematch, their first fight was good enough to sell us on the second fight.
Would you like to add to that, Daniel?
Yeah, I agree. I thought the Sean Porter. I mean, I'm sure you guys know, like a lot of boxing fans know, he always fights the same practically. He's very just like in your face, kind of like. I wouldn't even call him. He throws from angle. He just kind of. It's like he throws his whole body at you, and that's what I expected. I expected him to be the pressure fighter, and I mean, I had my money on him anyways. And Berto's the type of guy. I mean, the guy has talent, but I think he has. If you just look at his career, and then he got the Mayweather match, even though he got cleaned out easily in 12 rounds. Berto's the type of guy that people think he possesses more talent than he actually has. And he kind of made it to this top level because his manager is really good at promoting. It's not like he's not good. I think he's got talent, but he was just able to, like, I think I saw a tweet not too long ago, or it could have been this past weekend, saying that something about Berto being, in regards to talent, saying that he's not top tier. And I think he made his professional debut in like 2004, 2003 or something like that. I mean, if you think about it, if he actually made his debut during that time, which I think he did, there's a lot of fighters throughout this era and then throughout that era that he didn't fight. And I mean, I know he was going up the ranks and stuff, but it's just like, well, I mean, like, he's one of the only guys now in this era. Because if you look at it, the fighters now, you got Keith Thurman, Porter, these guys who are kind of like, their names have been a little bit bigger in the last couple of years. But Berto has been there, a little bit longer than all of them. But, I mean, does his resume actually show it? I mean, I don't know what you guys think.
Go ahead.
I mean, he's a two-time world champion. You know, so like you said, the skills are there, the talent is there, but you know, when you do look at the resume as a whole, he's never really fought the elite guys. You know, he kind of was crafted, you know, and not to take away from Andre Berto. Um, my good friend Tony Morgan was his original trainer, and in my personal opinion, that was the best Andre Berto we saw.
Yeah, I think he should have stayed with him.
Of course, because when he was with Tony, his style was very effective. Tony, you know, worked him the way his style, you know, he maximized his potential. I think when he went to Virgil Hunter, it was the wrong trainer. And, you know, I talked to Tony Morgan about that. We watched the Mayweather fight together, and he said, you know, wrong style. You know, Virgil Hunter is not for Berto, you know, and you could see that. You know, he wasn't the same explosive athlete that he once was. Now, granted, he went through an injury and, you know, he was shelved for a while, but you know, he's not the same explosive Berto that he once was. And he used to be a guy that was very strong and physical. And, you know, he got out-muscled in this fight. It was an ugly fight, you know, but that's all Sean Porter fights. Sean Porter's not going to make it a pretty fight. He's going to come in there, you know, he's going to be high energy, you know, wear you down, hang all over you, headbutt you, you know, not to say he's a dirty fighter because I don't believe he is, but he fought with a purpose in this, if that makes sense. Like you could tell he really wanted to win this fight, and he wanted that opportunity at Keith Thurman once again, and he did what he had to do to make sure he got that victory.
Yeah, real quick, I agree with that. Porter, I mean, regardless if, you know, he might have 2 losses, but I don't really see those losses as losses because, like, of course he lost to Thurman and then Brook, but they were competitive losses. Like, I mean, if you could see that, like, it's not like, of course, when you see a loss on paper, it looks, oh, okay, this guy lost. You would think automatically this guy got cleaned out. But Porter and his 2 losses against Brook and Thurman, he literally went down swinging as hard as you can. It's not like, you know, he didn't make it a competitive fight with each one. And then, like Hector said earlier, his Thurman fight last year could have went either way, and it could have. It could have. You know, that was a very exciting fight. I like that fight a lot, and you know, I wouldn't mind seeing him step in the ring with Thurman again. But I mean, I am disappointed that, you know, Thurman says that, oh, he'll be back in November. I mean, it's kind of like, oh, this whole twice a year thing, like how Mayweather did. I mean, Mayweather, you know, got used to it, but I think it's just because Al Heyman has so many fighters, he has to spread them out. But I guess at the end of the day, it's a business.
And as you said that, and just to build on what I said, a friend of mine, Eric, who actually works Keith Thurman's corner, is watching this show live, and he chimed in and said Virgil didn't have Berto prepared for Mayweather or Porter. I agree with that. That's essentially what I'm saying here. Like he wasn't the right guy. He didn't really seem invested in Berto like he does Andre Ward. Eric knows Berto well, has worked with him as well. So that's great insight. And he mentioned he was in the camp for the Mayweather fight, and he had one plan, you know, against Mayweather. You can't go into a fight with a guy who is arguably the best adjusting fighter of this generation and have one plan, because you know Mayweather has a lot of plans. Very, very interesting insight there. I don't think Thurman should fight Porter immediately. You know, I'd like to see Thurman fight someone else, not even Errol Spence. Even if Errol brings home the belt, I think Thurman should fight someone else. He's fought 2 very, very tough fights in a row. And I'm not saying an easy fight, but he deserves to fight. You know, he deserves to pick somebody for his next fight. Obviously, he's not going to pick a pushover because that's not Thurman. Thurman's the type of guy who will fight anybody. You know, so all this scared of Errol Spence stuff and all of that, that's garbage.
Let me throw out a question at everybody then. If fighters are only going to fight twice a year, you know, barring any injuries, Should they take any easy fights if you're only fighting twice a year? I mean, you have in between time to rest and to recuperate from fights. Keith did have two fights in a row, but I mean, he fought in July 2015 against Collazo. A year later, almost, he fought Sean Porter. We didn't see him in the ring again until March against Danny Garcia. So if he's not planning on fighting again until November, I mean, shouldn't he have a tough matchup in November then? I mean, should he get like a tune-up in November?
And not a tune-up. I'm not saying a tune-up, because if he fights somebody like Peterson, who is another mandatory, that's not a tune-up, man.
No, it's not.
Peterson's a tough matchup for anybody. What I'm saying is not a rough and tumble guy like Porter, who's going to headbutt you and, you know what I mean, kind of rough you up. He's coming off two very tough fights as it is, one with Porter. So I'm just saying, let's see more out of him in terms of fighting someone else, and then maybe a potential matchup with Porter. But Danny Garcia, Porter, he beat both of them. So they have to wait for him. He's the unified champion. He doesn't have to go and fight them. He can choose to fight Brooke, Spence, the winner. The ball's in his court. Well, and if you're going to fight a tough fight, why not fight a champion?
Well,
do you agree?
The Pacquiao fight, as Eric just mentioned, November, which I'm assuming, barring some kind of Australian miracle, Jeff Horn beating him, Pacquiao, that fight, Pacquiao fights in November. People remember he fought Vargas there last year, Cotto, Margarito. He fights in November. So that fight could be available. Or, maybe, Peterson is a totally acceptable fight for me. But, I think that for Keith, I think that, he could potentially be the biggest star along with Danny Jacobs that the PBC has. And I think it's important to keep that momentum, not just disappear after a fight happens. Promote yourself, get your name out there. And, fighting Pacquiao, will definitely get him the attention he needs.
Hey, I wouldn't mind a Pacquiao fight. Keith obviously wants that fight. Pacquiao, you haven't heard much from him out of that. I don't think he would object to that fight. The sticking point there would be Bob Arum. Is Bob Arum going to want that fight? That's that's the one who's going to be the sticking point in all of the negotiations there, because they both he's expressed he'll fight him.
No, yeah, I agree with that. And going back to Hector's point about if you become a 2-fight-a-year fighter, especially if you have big gaps, like Thurman says he's going to fight. Okay, he fought in March and he's going to fight again in November. That's a pretty big gap. And especially if you hold a world title in your division, I could see Hector's point that, do you really need a tune-up? Like, you're fighting twice a year, especially when you got a big gap like that. That makes sense to me. Like, don't try to reach for a world title if you don't want to fight the best guys every single time. But what were you just saying, Joseph? I forgot. I was gonna touch on what you just said
about the Bob Arum being the sticking point between the negotiations of Thurman and Pacquiao. I know Thurman will fight him, and why not? See, that's what I mean. That and by no means is that an easy fight. I guess I worded it wrong. So I didn't mean in terms of a tune-up, because he's a unified world champion. At this stage, you don't fight tune-up fights, really. You know what I mean? Particularly when the fights are spaced out. But my point being, why fight Porter again right after you came off of fighting Porter and Danny Garcia, two very tough fights? Why fight him again immediately when really there are other big fights out there? You know what I mean? And why not enjoy fighting a legend? Somebody like Pacquiao, or even Peterson. Peterson is an accomplished fighter as well. He's no walk in the park for anyone. So, why not fight these guys instead of Porter immediately? Or, like I said, fight somebody, the winner out of Kell Brook and Errol Spence later on. You know, if it's November.
No, I absolutely agree with that.
And Freddie Roach wants the Thurman fight too. You know, so both sides want it. Does Bob Arum want it?
Exactly. I think that's the whole sticking point here is Bob Arum is that, you know, the guy of course knows the business. He's been in here. He promoted Ali, for God's sakes. Like the guy knows the business, but he's, you know, as many times as he's been interviewed, and even I've, you know, asked him questions about it, and you know, especially when Pacquiao's last fight, I think it was Vargas, at his media workout, we asked him about the rumors around the Broner fight, because there was a couple rumblings before. I think Vargas was announced about Pacquiao fighting Broner, and then, you know, Broner posted some stuff and everything. And then Bob Arum says that he reached out to Broner's camp and Heyman, and he always blames it on the other half, like the other team. And it's come to the point where the first couple times I was like, oh, okay, I could see it. You know, there's a lot of animosity, but if Heyman's already showing that he can work across the lines, and like it was always Heyman doesn't want to work with anybody. He's got his own PBC, Showtime. But I mean, look at Heyman. He's worked with Golden Boy. He's worked with you know, K2, Triple G. Like he's at a point where he has to put his guys out there against other fighters from other stables, and I just don't see him. I'm sure he's like being a little bit difficult in negotiations. I mean, because, you know, that's how he becomes a, you know, successful business guy. But I still put the blame on Bob Arum. It's just like, you know, one of our other reporters, writers said today. Anthony said that he's hearing about Bradley Vargas too in July. And I knew that. I think I mentioned that to you, Joseph, a couple months ago. I was like, Brad, they haven't talked about Bradley once. Like, they haven't touched on him because they're waiting for the Vargas rematch. I mean, when did Bradley fight? Was over a year ago now, the Pacquiao fight, right?
Yeah, last April.
And I knew it too because there was nobody else in his stable, in top-ranked stable, that Bradley could fight. And I knew they were going to wait for the Vargas match, especially after he was going. They set up the Pacquiao Vargas match. I was like, oh well, he's going to lose to Pacquiao, and then they're going to make the rematch. But what's going to happen following that? And it's all Bob Arum, man. Like he's got to reach across the lines and make deals, man. I mean,
Well, I'll say this: Keith Thurman and Danny Garcia got paid $2 million each on their purses for their fight. Jesse Vargas got $2.8 million to fight Pacquiao. So I think that Eric brought this up. He said that Broner outpriced himself. He was offered $4 million to fight Pacquiao, and he turned it down. So I think that people maybe are expecting higher paydays. They think that it's the Pacquiao of 2009, where he's selling $1 million pay-per-views no matter who he fights. In the United States, that's no longer the case. But you know, it does take both sides to make it happen. But you're right. I mean, you know, speaking of Bradley, actually, I'm glad you brought him up because he actually and I guess Adrian Broner got caught up in some kind of spiff where Bradley brought up and was interviewed saying that Broner would make for a good tune-up for him to fight. And Broner came back out saying that, you know, he'd whoop his ass. He's not any kind of tune-up, and called Bradley and Uncle Tom as well. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind seeing Bradley against Broner, to be honest with you. I'd rather see that than Jesse Vargas too. I mean, the only person that wants to see Bradley Vargas too is Jesse Vargas, and that's it.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I'd rather see Broner Bradley. I still think that Bradley's got a lot left of the tank.
Broner would lose by unanimous decision, and I'm gonna tell you why. Bradley's active. He does a lot of little things right, and Broner's lazy in the ring. Yeah, he's talented, but he doesn't do enough, and Bradley would outwork him. We all know Bradley ain't knocking nothing out. You know, he's not punching through a wet paper bag, but he will outwork somebody, you know, and he's tough. I don't think that Broner would do enough to beat him. I think Broner would lose that fight and just further tarnish anything he has left because, you know, he's surviving on talent. When anyone talks about Broner, what do you hear? Oh, he's so talented, but he messes up. He makes stupid decisions. he's surviving solely on that stigma of, hey, he has talent, but that's it. Can you really say, and what really ruined him is when he wanted to become Mayweather. When he was himself, he was a much more effective fighter.
He still wants to become Mayweather, man. I don't think that's left him. I agree with you that he has talent, but what got him bigger than what he is his mouth, is his outlandish personality. He's trying to become Mayweather, and obviously he moves the needle, because I mean the ratings that PBC gets when he fights for Showtime were really good. I mean,
Yeah.
he puts up the numbers, so obviously people tune in to want to see him fight. So obviously he's doing something right. But I don't think it's more like, okay, because this guy's good. I think it's just because it's his mouth, it's his personality. Like, people just, because his haters and his supporters tune in.
Okay, so in saying all of this, let's move on to the next fight, which was definitely the fight of the night, and has to be one of the candidates for fight of the year. Although the scorecards wouldn't indicate so, man, Oscar Valdez and Miguel Mariaga, that was a hell of a fight.
Yep.
Valdez came in there like he always does, throwing everything with power, and Mariaga took it and gave him back his own, and it was a back and forth war the whole fight. I had Valdez winning at the end, so the right man won, particularly because there was a knockdown that was scored late. But that fight was close. I was appalled at what the judges' scorecards read, but man, I would love to see those two fight again. I didn't, outside of the Nicholas Walters fight, I didn't know much about Mariaga. I didn't see a lot of his fights, but man, he showed up against Valdez, and Valdez showed that he's a true champion. So I'm looking forward to seeing a fight between those two again. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess I'll go first, but I agree. The one thing I can hope is that, like you said, we didn't know much about Mariaga coming into this fight. Like, this was like kind of like his coming out party. Like, okay, this is the big stage for him. Yeah, I agree that he lost to, and Valdez, had to work for it, and he did show the grit to get that, to win that fight. But I also, like I mentioned earlier, with going back to Porter having the two losses, is that Mariaga lost with his heart in the ring. Like, he fought hard. Like, he fought hard to lose. And I hope it doesn't go unnoticed. Like, I hope the guy can still get some pretty prominent fights and keep up that work level, because I think he's one of those guys that, wasn't necessarily meant to be in the stardom of like the boxing kingdom, but he was able to get this fight and show that, okay, yeah, I might have lost, but I put up a fight, and that means he can probably give a pretty good fight to any other fighter within that division. So I hope, I like Valdez, and I agree that he won, but I appreciated the not knowing Mariaga too much, and him coming in and putting in the work and showing people, like, you might not know who I am, but look at me now. Like, I'm a good fighter. Do you know what I mean?
And man, he showed up. It was almost reminiscent, not quite, but almost reminiscent of the Rung Savai showing up against Chocolatito. You know what I mean? Nobody expected that to happen. And, you run into a guy that's tougher than you think. And, barring the knockdown and a couple rounds where, he was bested, he could have pulled it off. He very well could have pulled that fight off. He was there all night, and he gave Valdez everything he wanted, man.
I'm a big Oscar Valdez fan. I think of him highly. I hope that we get to see him in with the other belt holders at featherweight: Leo Santa Cruz, Abner Mares, Gary Russell Jr. This fight was a test for him, and I think he passed. It reminded me, even down to the trunks that Mariaga was wearing, of the Miguel Cotto Ricardo Torres fight back in 2005, if anybody remembers that fight. But it was definitely a fight that tested Cotto, and this fight tested Valdez. He had to go the full 12 rounds. Mariaga was pushing him in that 12th round, and I think that the fight lived up to the standard that was set by the StubHub Center, and it continues this tradition of having great fights. Looking at the undercard, we got to bring this up. Jesse Magdaleno scored a second round TKO, and afterward he called out Guillermo Rigondeaux, who was going to fight on the Ward Kovalev undercard against Moises Flores coming up on June 17th. What's everybody's thoughts about Magdaleno taking on Rigo?
My thoughts are, the knockout was impressive until he called out Rigo. Then I had to shake my head, man, because Magdaleno's a good kid, good fighter. He's not in Rigo's atmosphere, not in the same solar system, man. Rigo would beat him quite easily, in my opinion. I respect him for calling out Rigo, and Rigo could use the work because he's been inactive. Yeah, he's going to be fighting here soon, but he could use the work. But I don't think Magdaleno is on that level, and definitely not at that point in his career where he can be calling out or fighting a guy like Guillermo Rigondeaux.
Yeah, I agree too. My opinion of Jesse Magdaleno is that I think the kid, still has a lot to show. I was there live for his fight again when he won the world title, the WBO, against Nonito Donaire. And yeah, Donaire has lost a lot of what he had before his loss to Nicholas Walters and Rigondeaux and all that stuff. But I scored that fight for Donaire. I didn't think Magdaleno did enough to win, but he got the nod, but I didn't see that how it was like a gray area. I didn't see that like, oh, it could have went either way. I thought Donaire beat him, not convincingly, but enough for like, okay, you didn't really have to question it. So ever since then, like I've been waiting for Jesse Magdaleno to kind of come out and show me what he's got. I mean, he's got a world title, obviously, but he hasn't really been tested. And it's a matter of time, just before he steps in there. And I agree with you, like you said, him calling out Rigo is, I mean, he's got balls, but Rigo will wipe the floor with him.
The saying, there's levels to this, and Rigo, I said it the other day. We had a chat on Instagram, and shout out to everybody watching this live on Instagram. We appreciate your support and all your questions. We'll get to those as well. I said it. I was asked who I felt was the best, or who we felt were the best pound for pound fighters. And I said consensus, Andre Ward. You have to say it because, he beat arguably, one of the top 3 pound for pound guys in the world. And, although disputed, he still won on the cards. So consensus there, but skill wise, you got to go with Rigo and Lomachenko. So if you're looking at it on pure boxing skill, those two are probably the cream of the crop boxing skill wise in the world. And then it goes down from there, Andre Ward, which is right up there with him. Don't get me wrong, but Magdaleno doesn't equate in there anywhere, and not that he's a bad fighter once again, but he's not ready for Rigo. Also on that card, by the way, Shakur Stevenson, the U.S. Olympic silver medalist, made his pro debut in a 6-round fight.
Yeah, that was really quick before you continue. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was going to be a 4-rounder, but it was actually a 6-rounder. I'd like to know the reasoning behind that. Maybe it was just more because they just wanted to get him up there faster. But I thought that was interesting.
They said it's because they want to fast track him, which I thought was interesting because he's only had, if I'm not mistaken, 28 amateur fights. He wasn't like a Lomachenko with 400 amateur fights. He only lost one of his amateur fights. That was the one, which garnered him the silver medal. But I felt like it was interesting that he would debut in a 6-rounder.
Right.
In my opinion, in the fight, he won and he was in control in the fight, but he has a lot to work on. I felt like he had very little pop in his punches. And for a debut fight, I thought he should have got his man out of there and won a little more impressively, but that's just me. He did win. I mean, he controlled the fight, no question there. But I think if you're making your pro debut, you want to make a bigger statement. That's my opinion. Did you guys see the fight, and what were your thoughts on that?
I mean, I agree, you know, in terms of the pop behind his punches, but I think it was just so difficult because he had so much hype behind him coming out of the Olympics as a silver medalist, and Floyd Mayweather going over to Rio to try to sign him, and then Top Rank taking him out of left field, and then Andre Ward swooping in and all that stuff. He had a lot of hype behind him. So I thought I kind of expected that, the first pro debut wasn't going to live up to par to a lot of people because the hype was just so high for him. But he's a young kid. And I mean, you can only hope that he takes the pro debut as it is, and he just develops and, just keeps on going up from there. But, I think it was just difficult for him or for anybody in that situation to live up to that hype in the first professional bout. So, I mean, we can only hope that he just keeps training hard and keeps going up.
I wish they wouldn't do that to young fighters, make comparisons, particularly lofty comparisons like Floyd Mayweather. This is the next Floyd. And I wish they didn't do that and they just let fighters be fighters, and that's the media doing that. But yeah, you're right. It makes it incredibly difficult. He was fighting in California. Not that that's a big thing. He just fought in Rio, but to make his debut, a lot of debuts happen in a fighter's hometown as well. That's why I mentioned California. So that may be a little bit of added pressure, the 6th round thing. And then you had a guy who was hungry, because think of it from Edgar Brito's standpoint. This guy can spoil Christmas for, an up and coming guy making his debut. He lands one punch. All it takes is one punch, So yeah, a lot of factors played in, but I'm interested to see how he develops. He's got a long way to go. Hopefully they handle him properly. That's all I got to say about that.
I'll just chime in really quick about that. I think that, Shakur Stevenson, it kind of shows where Top Rank is kind of heading. It shows that they are thinking about the future. Last month, in March, they had the big event on St. Patrick's Day with Michael Conlon. So I think Top Rank, in that sense, as far as preparing for the future and kind of diversifying the fighters that they sign, I think they understand more than most companies that this is a international sport. It's not just an American sport. So, I look forward, and I think that, if anything, Top Rank likely has the best matchmakers. If you look at the careers of Cotto, Floyd, Oscar De La Hoya, Manny Pacquiao, all these guys were brought up through the Top Rank system and matched with the right fighters at the right time. And I think that they'll develop both Stevenson and Conlon and get them to that stage where they'll be able to fight in a world title and also have a fan base built in as well.
So who was more impressive in their debut?
You know what? I think that
Conlon live, or you were out there. You weren't at that fight.
Yeah, I was out there. I think that maybe Conlon, but I would say as far as in the ring, it was about the same for me. But I will say that Conlon, and I think maybe because he had Conor McGregor there, it was in New York. It was on St. Patrick's Day. It felt like more of an event than just fighting on the undercard at a good venue on a good card like Stevenson did. But I think Conlon showed that he may be the fighter that has a bigger fan base starting off.
Yeah, I agree with Hector. Is that if having Conor McGregor there on his debut at Madison Square Garden on St. Patrick's Day was a huge event, and if they could build some type of partnership with McGregor where, he walks him out every fight, or he shows up at his press conferences, or they can attach Conlon's name to McGregor as much as they can, or show video of them together, then that's gonna skyrocket Conlon, because then he'll be a crossover star not only in boxing but MMA fans. Everybody knows who Conor McGregor is, and then eventually they're gonna start saying, "Oh, who's this Conlon kid?" Obviously, if McGregor is on him, I want to check him out and something like that. So, yeah, I think Conlon's got the rocket pack on his back right now for Top Rank.
Yeah, and from what I'm seeing and hearing, that is the plan. Conor actually wants to start training with him as well. So, in terms of marketing, that'll be huge for him. And just talking about Conor McGregor, because I know the question's going to come up. The fight with Mayweather, I hope it doesn't happen. Personally, I know it's great for marketing, but it's a circus show. Good for numbers. They'll get paid, but it's kind of a black eye for the sport. And in my opinion, it's two different disciplines. We know what's going to happen. Anybody who follows boxing and knows anything about boxing knows that Floyd Mayweather would win that fight with no issue at all. So it's a circus is what it is. And they're going to get paid a lot of money to do it. If you're going to do that, why, I get it. Why Floyd? The money, but fight someone else. And I'm shocked that they would even sanction a fight like that. A guy with no professional boxing matches under his belt to fight arguably the best fighter the sport has seen in the last 20 years, in terms of what he's accomplished. It's subjective, who you think's the best, but it's just a circus. It really is.
And I think that, looking at the fight, how much the fighters are going to get paid, there's not going to be a good undercard. It's going to be $100 pay-per-view, just like the Pacquiao fight. And, I think by now, you know what you're getting when you pay for a Floyd Mayweather fight, man. I mean, with this fight, he has the possibility of actually, putting on some kind of Arturo Gatti performance, which he should be able to do. But, Floyd's the one who's risking everything. He's not going to get any credit for this win. And imagine if he loses.
Correct.
I mean, if he were to somehow lose this fight, I mean, he might as well be 0-49.
It's a lose-lose.
It's a lose-lose, exact. Well, I mean, not for his pockets.
Not for his
money, or not for his pockets,
No, but his legacy. If he were to lose that, which again, not going to happen, but in that situation, if that happened, everything is damaged. Because people are going to criticize him and say he was a paper champion all this time, and that he handpicked fights and, now he let a guy from MMA, because it would embarrass the sport too. People would not just like to see him lose, but people would be embarrassed who follow this sport, that a guy from another discipline, being MMA, came in and beat arguably, indisputably the best fighter of this generation. It'd be a black eye for the sport, and I don't want to see it. Would it be entertaining? Probably. You know what I mean? It'd be funny to see, but in terms of being serious, if you're going to do it, make it an exhibition,
Yeah. Or I guess if you wanted to, I mean, it wouldn't make it any better because it could end up like Muhammad Ali, Antonio Inoki, but I guess make the rules some kind of weird mix with MMA or boxing. I mean, I don't know, but Floyd is 40, so he's probably not going to go for that, and I wouldn't either. Trying a new discipline at 40, especially one as dangerous as mixed martial arts and boxing itself, isn't a good idea. I wish, if they really wanted to make this happen and make it a good event, I wish, Conor McGregor would have like 5 fights. I don't know. He goes in and fights Andre Berto, but honestly, I think Andre Berto would knock him out in like a round or two. So, I mean, that might ruin the promotion. I think it's just a waste of everybody's time, is what that is. It's the equivalent of me watching a video of Floyd putting money down on a football game and him winning $100 million. It's going to be the exact same thing. It's not going to be any different.
I agree with that.
So let's go ahead and talk about, we kind of skipped over it. Let's go ahead and talk about the undercard fights of the Porter-Berto fight. Let's talk about Jermell Charlo's performance against Charles Hatley. You know, he scored an impressive 6-round knockout. You know, he was able to kind of bring that out. It seems like the pissed off Charlos, I like them. They're more exciting in the ring. You know, I thought of them as being, especially Jermell, as being kind of these passive fighters. But, you know, I guess, you know, certain fighters bring out something about them. And, you know, both of them scored impressive knockouts in their last fights. But it must be said that Charles Hatley hadn't been in the ring since November 2015 before he fought Charlo.
That's a long time.
It is a long time. Very impressive win, no doubt. What I am disappointed in is how the Charlo brothers have handled the post-fight after fights. For instance, Jermell knocks Hatley out, and as Hatley is laying there being attended to by the doctors, he's yelling to the crowd, he's asleep. He's asleep. And that's not showing good sportsmanship. You know, this guy is hurt. It's not like he knocked him down and he just couldn't beat the count. He's going to be okay. He's unconscious. He may not make it. I mean, we've seen it before. We've seen fighters get hurt and never be the same ever again. So Jermell did the same thing basically when he fought J-Rock. You know, he didn't want to shake his hand, or, you know, so I get it. You guys are pissed off, you know, and you're great when you're pissed off. But at the end of the day, it's still a sport, and you got to show sportsmanship, good sportsmanship. And I don't know if you guys saw, but there was a Charlo interview with Fight Hype that was released yesterday, and they were asking Jermell about the Canelo Chavez and about the Triple G and Danny Jacobs. And man, watch his response and watch how he's blatantly disrespectful to the interviewer. You know, there's no need for that. I like them as fighters. I don't like their personalities, what they're becoming. I think their day's coming as well.
I think I agree with you 100% in terms of sportsmanship, but the only reason I think it's also their personality, that they're just like, you know, especially with the adrenaline going after winning a fight, and like that they're just out there. They're just like, you know, F this, like he's asleep and everything. But I also believe that it's his promoter and his management team and their management team telling them to channel that personality and just show it, because the interview when following Charlo's win against J-Rock, you know, out here in LA a couple months back, we interviewed Richard Schaefer, and Schaefer told us, me and some of the other media guys, that, because I mean, obviously the crowd reaction, they were booing Charlo because they didn't want to shake his hand, all of that, like you said. And Schaefer, I mean, so we asked him about that, and then he said, well, look, he was just like, he can take like the villain role, like a Floyd Mayweather and stuff. He automatically made that distinction, and I wouldn't be surprised. Like I'd be extremely surprised if Schaefer or anybody within his camp or management team didn't have that conversation with him. Like, look, you have this stigma now, or at least a little bit. You know, run with it. You know, try to. I mean, of course, they don't want to say, "Oh, try to be the next Floyd Mayweather," because, you know, that's who can be. But if you can get people to hate you, then, you know, they're going to tune in to watch. Just like, it's just the same thing with Broner. There's a certain recipe there, and it's always been like that. And even going back to Muhammad Ali and stuff, because Muhammad Ali was good, but he had a mouth on him, like, yeah, I'm the greatest, you know, I'll beat your ass and all that stuff. It's that confidence. And then especially now with Mayweather setting the bar how he did, especially with his outlandish personality, I wouldn't be surprised if Schaefer or any of that team at Ringstar or PBC or whatever told the Charlo brothers, hey, run with this personality so your stock can go up.
I mean, I get it, and it's like that WWE mentality. You have the villain, because I can remember exactly when Mayweather became that guy. You could see the transition. It started with around the Arturo Gatti fight, where he really started, identifying with that persona, and then it hit its full tilt when he fought De La Hoya and beat De La Hoya.
HBO 24/7 is what really put him out there, because that's when I think they debuted it. It debuted with the De La Hoya Mayweather fight, and like when I think of 24/7, I always think of Floyd Mayweather, because that really skyrocketed him. Because if you think about it, the 24/7s after that, it was all Mayweather. Every single time, it was all Mayweather, and practically every 24/7.
Yeah,
practically.
Definitely. Well, 24/7 making Mayweather was like MTV making Michael Jackson. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? That platform, or they made each other, rather, because Michael did a lot for MTV as well. But he was provided that platform and he ran with it. And I think business wise, it's smart. But I never saw him go to the extreme like what the Charlos are doing. Like I said, they're being unsportsmanlike when the competition is over. So it's okay to be, talk trash and say whatever you got to say, push each other, whatever, before the fight to build and hype the fight. But you have a man laying unconscious on the mat with doctors scrambling to make sure that he's okay. And he didn't come to immediately either. It was pretty brutal knockout. And you're yelling and screaming that he's asleep. And, I get it. They talked trash and he was upset. But the fight is over. You won. You were the better man. There's no need for that. Now, if you want to interview and talk some more trash and all that, great. Just not while he's laying down. Perfect example. We're media. When we're ringside, somebody gets knocked out, I can't stand over him and shoot photos. That's frowned upon. You can't do stuff like that. So he should have come over and saw how his opponent was doing. And I read a report that Hatley didn't take too well to that, because apparently Charlo came to him later and told him, God bless you and your family. And he told him basically,
Kick
piss
rocks.
off. Yeah, piss off. So I understand that, because how would you feel? And it's not about emotions here, but that's just the wrong way to go, is my point. It's okay. It sells fights to be the villain, but it's still a sport. And if someone's hurt, they could be hurt for life.
I'm gonna just kind of keep it simple as far as with the Charlos. I think both fighters are entitled, and I think they behave like spoiled brats. I'm gonna just take a look here. Jamal Charlo became a world champion in September 2015 against Cornelius Canine Bundridge. He defended his title against Wilkie Camfort, Austin Trout, and then Julian Williams. But these guys want you to act and treat them like they unified a division, or they took out the entire 154-pound division. And one of the things that's got them upset is people don't treat them that way, and they shouldn't. And so that's why they've been acting like this, and they've reacted this way to media. I mean, I don't really, know what to say about the way they act, with some professional, and they're not going to get any sponsorships. They're not going to get any bigger. They're not going to get their own, Fight View 360 or All Access, which is what Showtime does, acting like that. I think that, it's disappointing, especially Jermell, kind of doing that. But, you got to remember, after the fight with Julian Williams, Williams tried to go up to, Charlo after the fight, and the same thing happened. Charlo told him to go kick rocks. So, this is a learned behavior that both fighters have. This is boxing. This is a business. You're not in this to, you can either make friends or you can make money. So these guys are, just all about making money. But you know, that's what my opinion of this is. I think they're both self-entitled guys. They think that they're the kings of the division. They want credit for something that they haven't done yet. And you know, Charlo's going to move up to middleweight, and you know, we'll see what he does. Let's see if you know, Jermell Charlo is going to fight Jarrett Hurd, if he'll fight Lara, if he'll fight Andrade. Until then, you know, you beat Hadley and you beat John Jackson and you beat Martirosyan. Okay.
What about Lara too? Lara's right there, and
Yeah, Lara,
the same stable. Like, we got there's a, like you said, like there's a lot of guys out there like Swift, you know,
and Swift said he wants it. He said he'll fight
Yeah.
anybody in the 154 division. So
I'd love to see that.
why not? He's long, you know. He can cause some problems too, man.
I wouldn't even mind them throwing Cotto in there just for the hell of it.
Nah, man,
Cotto ain't gonna fight this.
Nah.
You know,
I know he wouldn't fight it, but I mean, technically, he's in the same division.
You know what though? I'm glad you brought that up because Austin Trout, I think maybe a week or maybe 2 weeks ago, since Cotto is still kind of looking at for an opponent, although I'm hearing that it's going to be Yoshihiro Kamagai, who's known for fighting Robert Guerrero.
I like that fight.
Yeah, that's a good fight. You know, I think it's going to be an action-packed fight. It'll be a good fight for Cotto to come back. But another fight that was thrown out was a rematch with Austin Trout, which I guess, you know, if Cotto wants to avenge a loss like he did against Margarito, I wouldn't mind seeing that either.
Yeah, I could agree. I wouldn't mind either Kamagai or Austin Trout. I'd be happy with either one.
No, man. Cotto needs to stay retired, man.
I just want to see him one last time, man. I've always been a fan of the guy. The guy has that. He's always had that silent assassin like look and personality.
Well, that's him in person too.
Yeah,
he's a funny dude, man, because he's not rude per se. Because when Cotto enters the gym, he'll shake your hand, he'll talk to you for a moment, but once he's business, he's all business. You know, he's not going to look at you. He's not going to acknowledge anything you say, or you know. So he's a kind of strange guy in that sense, because a lot of fighters are approachable, you know, for the most part, not all, but you know, for the most part, fighters are approachable, and Cotto's not really one of them once he gets going. So if you don't catch him when he first arrives at the gym, you're kind of asked out with him,
right?
Unless you're in his inner circle. Now on the other hand, Brian
Perez,
yeah, he's awesome. He's very approachable. So, yeah, man. I guess.
I mean, I don't know if we're getting towards the tail end here, but one thing we didn't touch on is Lucas Matisse is coming back.
Yeah, and somebody asked that question earlier. Our thoughts on Lucas Matisse. So if you want to go ahead and kick that off, we'll keep it short because we still got to get Joshua Klitschko in this, and then we'll wrap it up with that.
Yeah, we'll wrap it up with that. But yeah, I've always liked the machine, Lucas Matisse. I've always been a fan of the guy. I know he lost a Postal, and it was it was a pretty bad loss for him, and then he hasn't been around since, and there was rumors of retirement and stuff. But I've always liked the guy. I've always liked him. He's a fighter. You know, for there was a period of time where he was one of the most feared guys in boxing. He was knocking everybody out.
He was a monster.
And you know, I'm anxious to see how he does in this fight since he hasn't fought in a really long time. And I hope he does really well and he kind of gets back into the fold where he can add another name. Do you guys know, is this a 147 fight?
I know he's fighting Emmanuel Taylor. I think it is a 147 fight, but I'll double check that.
Okay.
Which will be interesting. That's going to be interesting at 147.
Yeah, because if Matisse can kind of jump back into the fold and, you know, start building back his you know, the old Lucas Matisse that we saw before, if he can start building that back up and like make his name prominent again in the 147 division. Oh man, we already have crazy ass names in the 147 division. Imagine adding Matisse back into it.
Yeah, that would be great, and it would be exciting. I think that Matisse, he's one of the hardest punchers in the sport. He's 37 wins, 34 knockouts, 4 losses. I mean, and what I like about it is that it's on the undercard of Canelo Chavez, and Emmanuel Taylor's no pushover, and I think that's a good comeback fight. It'll definitely test him to see where Matisse is at. Having not fought since October 2015.
For sure. I don't know how he'll fare at 147. We got to see if that power is going to come up with him too. I mean, he'll still possess a punch, obviously, because even for at where he was a huge puncher. So I'm sure some of that'll come up, but it doesn't always come up with fighters. So we'll see.
Well, yeah, I mean, proof in the pudding with Chocolatito going from 112 to 115. It's
Correct.
just 3 pounds, but look at the fights he's been at 115 with Quadras and Rungvisai. Like, you could tell that jump, whether it just because it's 3 pounds, it seems like it's 30 pounds to him.
And this is the guy I got to give you a hard time, Hector. We were in Brooklyn, New York, eating pizza. We were getting prepared for the Spence Algieri card. We were covering that card that night. Hector and I were eating pizza. This dude looks at me and tells me that Chocolatito would knock me out cold.
Yo, Chocolatito would whoop you, bro.
If
you got in the ring, he would whoop you, bro.
He would beat my ass. He's a world-class. Many consider him pound for pound the best in the world. At this time, he was 108, I believe. Or he might have been, was he 112?
Yeah, he was 112.
Okay, he was 112. At this time, I weighed 185. So he's saying that he could one punch knock me out.
Body shot. Yep.
And I told him, impossible, bro. Number two, what happens when I touch him at 185? Now, keep in mind, I boxed before. So it's not like I'm just a guy who's never been in the ring and doesn't understand and is going to throw some wild stuff. I would get my ass whipped. I get that. No question about it. We're talking about one of the best fighters in the world, but there's no way a 112-pound man is knocking me out with one punch. He'd stop me maybe with an accumulate. He can't knock out dudes that are 115.
So Quadras
he can't knock out dudes that are 112, 115.
Hey, who else is knocked out Quadras and Rungvisai?
That's true. But I get,
but they're 115, bro.
I could see both points.
Think about this. Cotto went up and fought Canelo, right? Cotto was punching him. It may have been Chocolatito, bro. It looked like it wasn't even affecting him.
Man, Cotto threw arm punches that whole fight for the most part.
I'm just saying.
Canelo could have knocked him out too, but I think
I think so.
He kind of put the brakes on.
My point is, when you're that small, you're not gonna. When you run into somebody with that weight like that, you're not just gonna flatten somebody like that. You know what I mean? You could stop them on an accumulation of punches, but one punch knockout, unless you were like blindsided, maybe. But like if you're in there fighting and you're postured up and but yeah, he'll beat your ass because he's going to be way fast, and touching him would prove super difficult, especially somebody with skills like his. And I'm going to take this time to give Mr. Zaldivar a hard time too, because man, when we were ringside in Vegas for the Crawford Postol, man, he gave me a hard time thinking Postol was actually going to beat Crawford. Is he crazy?
I concede on that. I thought it was going to be a way closer fight than
we witnessed an ass whooping.
Yeah, we did. I thought Postol, being the number one, number two guys, pretty much going head to head at 140, and then even I was at Postol's media workout, and then I think he was the 6-1 odds. Crawford was a 6-1 betting favorite in Vegas.
Yeah,
and I even thought about it. I think I told you, I was like, man, we should just put some money on Postol, like just because, like, the guy's good. I mean, just because he lost to a better elite fighter, it doesn't mean the guy doesn't have talent. There's usually always somebody out there who's better than you. And
yeah, definitely.
But I just, I thought, I didn't think he was going to get his ass whooped as that bad. I thought, he was going to have some moments and put up a
He
decent
did have
fight.
some moments in the first and second round, and then Crawford did what exactly
he figured him out.
And didn't I tell you that before the fight? I said the
Yeah.
thing about Crawford, he has that X factor, being just like Mayweather. They don't fight anything alike, and I'm not comparing the two, but what they do share is the fact that they can adjust. And if you don't make the adjustments, they're going to shut you out. They both have that thing, because when Mayweather adjusted to opponents, he did the same thing. He shut them out. There was no question who won. And prime example of that is the Shane Mosley fight. He was hurt, clearly hurt.
And then he came back.
He came back and completely shut him down. He did the same thing to Zab Judah. Zab Judah was getting the best of him. He adjusted. Zab Judah didn't adjust. He completely shut him down. And Crawford has that same thing. He can do the same thing. He takes a round or two to figure you out. He did that to Hank Lundy too. And then he shuts you down. You no longer can do anything. And for that reason, I think he's one of boxing's elite right now. There's others, obviously, but I think he's up there. Definitely. Top 5 pound for pound, for sure. No. And I said that back then.
No, absolutely. I agree. And then I don't know if you guys will agree with me on this, but I think the one I'm looking at right now, and just because he just came back from an over 2-year layoff because of legal troubles, Mikey Garcia. Mikey Garcia, man, I'm waiting for him to, because he's right in the middle. He's at 135, and there's been talk about Lomachenko moving up and fighting Mikey Garcia, or Mikey Garcia moving up to 140 and then eventually fighting Terrence Crawford and stuff like that. Mikey Garcia is in like an area right now where he has the potential to have some big fights with some guys.
Mikey Garcia, Lomachenko.
Yeah, and honestly, I wouldn't even know who to pick in that fight. Yeah, people, there's people who are fans of each and stuff saying, oh yeah, Mikey Garcia wiped the floor with him, or no, Lomachenko would. That fight, Mikey Garcia's toughest tests right now are going to be, there's talk about him fighting Jorge Linares, and I look forward to that one too. But in terms of like overall picture, Lomachenko and Crawford as future opponents, man, that I wouldn't even know.
Lomachenko and Crawford?
Yeah, because Mikey Garcia could fight either one. He's at 135. He can go up to 140. Crawford, or Lomachenko can go up to 135.
I think Crawford will move to 47 before that happens, though.
No. Yeah,
not because he's running, but just because I don't think he'll be able to make the weight comfortably to meet.
Oh yeah, I agree with that. I think Crawford should, if he doesn't move to 147 this next fight that he has, I think it's a waste of time. I think he's hesitant. He should. Especially after this last fight. Who else is at 140? He's cleaned out the division.
He could. I guess he could technically unify again against Ndongo if he wants to. But
Ndongo's going to be a hell of a fight, though.
Yeah, it'll be a difficult fight. He's a tall, rangy guy who knows how to box on the outside, especially with his left hand. But going back to Mikey Garcia, I think that fights with Lomachenko and Crawford would be good. I do feel like Lomachenko may be too small, and I think that Mikey, because I haven't seen Lomachenko deal with a technician really. In a fight, I think maybe Salido, Gary Russell Jr., maybe you can make the argument, but I think that Mikey being a patient fighter, and he's gonna wait on Lomachenko to do things. And I think, having said that, though, one of Mikey's deficiencies and something that's gonna give him trouble is a guy who's gonna fight on the back foot. Someone like Crawford or even Robert Easter Jr., I think would give him trouble as well. Now, I'm not saying he can't win those fights, but guys who stylistically can fight on the back foot and can kind of switch up and constantly move and pot shot and get out of the way of counter punches are definitely going to give Garcia trouble, because Garcia is in a lot of ways, he's a great technician, but he's kind of robotic in a lot of ways. He's kind of set in a certain way, and sometimes it takes him a while to get started. Although, in his last fight, he took that dude out in the third round. So, maybe he's adjusted that.
Mikey Garcia would definitely give Lomachenko a hell of a run, much like Salido did, because he's a more dynamic fighter than Salido. Salido, obviously is tough for anybody. The only person I ever seen really handle him was Gamboa. And, that wasn't even really an easy fight. But Mikey Garcia definitely poses a big challenge to Lomachenko. He's not going to be able to jump and hop around like he is and, do all these things, the matrix and all that they're talking about. Granted, taking nothing away from Lomachenko, but Mikey Garcia is too far disciplined to allow that type of stuff to go on, and he's dangerous. He's very technical himself, and he can punch. So, he's not a guy who's going to just come straight forward like Jason Sosa. And, he was tailor-made. So, yeah, you're going to look good against Sosa. Don't get me wrong. Sosa's a tough dude, man. But he's tailor-made for a style like Lomachenko's. And you brought up a good point, Hector, and Robert Easter. I think he's the dark horse. A lot of people forget about him. But he's a lanky, rangy dude, too. And definitely will cause problems in the division.
Yeah, he's a silent. He's in the shadows right now, but he's just looking for his coming out party, pretty much.
So we had a question: what our thoughts on Keith Thurman were? I love Keith Thurman. I know him personally. I'm actually in St. Pete, so I've spent a lot of time in the gym with Keith and gotten to know him. He's a great person, very cerebral fighter. And overall great guy, as a fighter. He's everything that they build him to be. He's that. He is, in my opinion, the biggest puncher in the welterweight division. Yeah, his knockouts have gone down, but it's more because he's focusing on boxing. And but don't get it twisted. He can pull that trigger when necessary. Even Robert Guerrero said, his jab is harder than Danny Garcia's right hand, and that's Guerrero. Guerrero's been in there with some warriors. So Keith Thurman is the real deal. But the welterweight division's a tough division. So, we'll see what happens. You can't say anything bad. He's the unified welterweight champion. So
I agree. And ending the show here, let's talk about Anthony Joshua, Vladimir Klitschko. They fight this Saturday, Wembley Stadium, 90,000 seats.
90,000. Wow.
So just to get straight to the point, fellas, what do you guys got? We'll start with you, Hector.
For me, I think that I favor Anthony Joshua going into the fight. I'm going to, the biggest factor, and it's something I always stress, is activity. Klitschko hasn't fought since he faced off against Tyson Fury. At his age, it may have been good to take a break, but, he wasn't the most active fighter anyway. He was fighting about 2 times a year. I think that Joshua can start off early and possibly get to Vlad. And also, it really depends on the referee. I mentioned this last time. Klitschko, although he's, comes from the school of Emmanuel Stewart, he also comes from the school of John Ruiz. And the man loves to hold. He loves to, get in when he can. If you remember the fight with Alexander Povetkin, it's not really a fight that you can rewatch. And I think if that happens, Joshua has the temperament to kind of offset that. And, the way to get out of a clinch and hold is to punch out of them and kind of move the opponent. And I think Joshua definitely is tall enough and strong enough to do so. So what I'm looking forward to is the official new era of heavyweight boxing to start on April 29th. And I think Joshua will stop Klitschko.
Wow. I said it yesterday when we had our boxing chat on Instagram. The later the fight goes, the more it favors Klitschko because he's got the experience, and he's gonna know how to conserve his energy and do just enough to get a win if necessary, and he has the power if Joshua gets reckless to also stop him. I'm picking Joshua to win. I think he's confident. I think he's a hungry lion. I think Klitschko being 41, coming off a long layoff and a devastating loss, I think it's just going to be too much for him to overcome. I think, like Hector said, it's a new era in boxing, and I think Joshua will win. I got an interesting comparison this past week. I interviewed Darnell Boone. Shout out to Darnell Boone if you're listening. Appreciate the interview. He gave me his insight into the fight, and he compared Joshua to Evander Holyfield. He said he reminds him, the bounce in his step and kind of the way he fights, a stronger version of Evander Holyfield, and that's a hell of a comparison. And if he fights even half as good as he did, he's going to be a hell of a champion. I just think they need to keep building him right, and I expect him to beat Klitschko as well next week or this weekend. Sorry.
Exactly. And yeah, just to chime in my 2 cents is that I do think Joshua's going to take it, but I do agree with Joseph saying that the further it goes into the fight, the more it favors Klitschko. Yeah, it's not good for Klitschko that he hasn't fought since the Tyson Fury fight. He hasn't been active. He's an older guy. But Klitschko, has, I don't even know, probably more than triple the fights than.
Yep, he does.
Than Joshua. I mean,
he's got almost as many title defenses.
Exactly.
Joshua has fights.
Exactly. And that, yeah, just because like the guy, he's older and he's been inactive and stuff. I get it. That takes a lot of toll on a boxer, but you can't really knock on the wisdom and the experience that this guy's had. I'm picking Joshua to win, but I don't think as many as people. There's a lot of people saying, "Oh yeah, Klitschko's over the hill. He's done." Even when he lost to Tyson Fury, yeah, he lost, but I mean, like, you can't discredit the guy. The guy was a world champion at the heavyweight division for what, over a decade.
Yeah.
And he beat all these guys. Like, he defended just because people said, "Oh yeah, the heavyweight division sucks. It's boring." Well, it's boring because these Klitschko brothers were beating everybody's ass.
Can I interject? Please, Hector, don't ever mention John Ruiz on this show, ever.
Hey, man.
Ever.
I was just letting you know the hug.
John Ruiz. Yo.
It was the worst.
He had the ugliest. You think Sean Porter fought an ugly fight against Andre Berto? Go watch a John Ruiz fight. I don't even think that was more like Dancing with the Stars, bro. This dude used to grab and hold, and man, you talk about a boring fight. I'm sorry, I had to go there.
You need to go on YouTube and type in David Tua against John Ruiz.
That's all you got to do.
That'll help you out, man.
Shout out to John Ruiz.
No, shout out. No.
Shout out to David Tua.
Yeah, David Tua. But yeah, I feel the same way you do, Daniel. The experience, you have to take that into account. And like I said, the later the fight goes, the more it favors Klitschko. So Joshua would do himself a favor not to recklessly come in and do work early, but intelligent pressure early and try to get, dispatch of Klitschko. If not, he's been known to gas, or that's kind of his reputation, Joshua, being muscle bound and whatnot. He kind of slows down, and that's not going to be good against an old lion.
Absolutely.
That's all I got to say about it. But we really appreciate everyone tuning in. both on YouTube and Instagram. I know it looks crazy because you can hear me, but you can't hear them that great because you hear them through my headphones, but we appreciate it. Next time, go on to youtube.com/Frontproof Media. You can hear the show live. We'll answer questions. There's a chat there as well. So we'll answer your questions. We may even do a show where we answer nothing but questions, because we're fans of the sport just like you are. And it's because of you that we're here. So with that being said, that's all I got to say. Daniel and Hector, anything you want to say to close the show?
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for tuning in and talking with us and listening. You know, as I stated at the beginning of the show, if I could shake everybody's hands, I would. Last thing before we get out of here, I want to shout out to Amanda Serrano for becoming the first 5-division champion in female boxing history and the first 5-division champion in Puerto Rican history. Viva Puerto Rico. Shout out to Amanda Serrano.
Absolutely. Good. Couldn't have said it better myself, fellas. But yeah, like you both said, we're all fans of the sport here. You know, just because we cover the sport, we report on it, interviews, go to these events and stuff, it doesn't mean that, you know, we have any type of egos or something. We're fans of the sport just like everybody else. And then we're gonna be present at Canelo Chavez in Vegas on Cinco de Mayo weekend next weekend. So if any of you guys or gals see any of us out there during the weekend in Vegas, whether it's at the Canelo Chavez Jr. fight or just on the strip or at the boxing expo that's that same weekend, come up to us and say hi. You know, we'll talk to you like that. Like they said, at the end of the day, we're all fans and we all love the sport.
Absolutely. So like he said, Vegas, Cinco de Mayo weekend, our whole team will be there. We'll be at the Boxing Expo the day of the fight as well. Make sure you come up, introduce yourself. We'll have some shirts and things to give away. So you may want to try to get with us early because I don't know how long they're going to last. But if you don't get one, we'll make sure to have them on our website, frontproofmedia.com. And we'll also post a picture and link on Instagram as well for you to pick those up. We'll have some hats coming as well. Again, we appreciate all of your support and thank you so much for joining us on the various social media platforms. And we will be back next week, Monday, same time, same place.